Welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to have a look at Endgame number 89 from the book 100 Endgames You Must Know by Jesus de la Villa. In this endgame, we are going to have a look at 3 examples and all to do with protected pass pawns. As you can see, white has a protected pass pawn, and protected pass pawns are generally a great asset when you in the end game. And if you have one, you'll have a great advantage, and if you do not have and you're defending against a protected pass pawn, you have to be very careful with your technique because the game can be lost anytime. So now here white has a protected pass pawn. So what you have to know is, because this pass pawn is protected, the black king should always keep an eye on this pawn. And as we know, according to endgame 1, we know of the square of the pawn, which means the king has to be always within the square, as mentioned, as seen here. And otherwise, if the king goes out of the square, generally this pawn, the f pawn, can easily queen. Now here black is tied to this pawn, and white has the liberty, on the other hand, to go and pick up this pawn and also try to attack this pawn as well. So we'll have a look at it. King d5, so black to move. After king d3, white has to move king e5. Now this is a very critical move. We'll see what happens if black goes to king c5. After that, king c3, king d5, king b4, and here comes king c6, a critical move. Black should always defend within this square of the pawn, and king c6 is a very critical move. After king a5, now black forces white to play and plays king c5. Now it's black's turn. It's taking the advantage because this pawn is going to go and promote. To avoid that, white has to play f6, have to give away the protected pass pawn, and now both pawns are now traded. After that, king d5, and this is a drawn endgame. The main reason, so it's according to endgame 80 and also endgame 3, which we looked at key square. So we'll have a look at it. After king f7, all white has to do is try to outmaneuver black's king. However, in this instance, because the pawn is on g4, we know according to endgame 3, the key squares for this pawn is f6, g6 and h6. Black is able not and prevent white king from coming to any of these 3 squares, and as a result, this is a drawn endgame. We'll have a continuation. So as a result, now this is a drawn endgame. So going back to this original position, what did we learn? Black always have to be within the square of the pawn, and because this black pawn is just 1 square away from the square of the pawn, black is able to defend it. Now going back to this position, what happens instead of king e5? What happens if black plays king c5? If that's the case, this is a loss. After king e4, b4, king e5, then b3. Now comes f6. Now both pawns actually promote, and it looks like black is all right. That's not the case. After king c6, now after queen c8, this is obviously a skewer, and then the queen is lost. Also, going back to this position, instead of king c6, what happens if black plays king c4? If that's the case, king c8, and if black goes to king d3, then simply another skew as well. So that's one of the critical moments in this endgame. In this second example, we do have protected pass pawn, and we obviously have the square of the pawn as well. However, unfortunately for black, the a5 pawn is 2 squares away from the square of the pawn, which means the king is unable to defend this pawn without coming off the square. If that's the case, then this pawn, the f5 pawn, will easily promote. So a possible continuation is king d3, king d5, king c3, king c5, and after that king b3. Now if black plays king b5 and come out of the square of the and if they come out of the square of the pawn, then this is a lost endgame. After f6, now you're unable to defend that pawn. So the possible continuation is king d5, and then after king b4, king a4, this pawn is lost. As seen in the first example, when we look at this example, it looks like it's a draw, because in the first example we said if the pawn is only one square away from the square of the pawn of the protected pass pawn, then this is a drawn endgame. Well, unfortunately for white, there is one exception to that rule. That rule is if the protected pass pawn is on the 6th rank, any part of the 6th rank, that means this is winning, regardless. Even if you have the pass pawn just one square away, it still won't work. It's all to do with the key square. So we'll have a look at it. King d4, after king d6, king c4. Now white simply has to outmaneuver and play f7. After king e7, both pawns are now traded, and after king f8, now white is simply trying to get the correct timing. After king f6, king h8, now the pawn is taken. And what is the difference between the first example and this example? It's all about key squares. We had looked at it in Endgame 3. If you are not sure, please look at it again. For g5 square, the key squares are f6, g6 and h6. For the g5 pawn, these are the three squares, and the white king is already occupying one of those squares, which means this is winning. After king g8, king f6, king can go to h8, g6, and this is a winning endgame. I hope you enjoyed this video. For more videos like this, please like and subscribe, and it's bye for now.